Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for our very first VirtuWorks live session at our new corporate headquarters. We've actually built this fantastic studio in the second floor of our headquarters to produce these upcoming events, presentations, tutorials, to give you, our businesses, the technological edge. So my name is Gianni, and I'll be your host during this presentation. Make sure that you use the Q&A in the Teams area to provide questions. There's probably also a place for you to add commentary, and we'll be taking care of those questions at the end of the presentation. Also note that this presentation will be available at the end. We'll be sending a link to this for you to check out. And just a word of warning, this is our very first presentation using this live studio on Teams with me as a remote host. So hopefully we don't have any technological issues occur during this presentation, but we've practiced, I think, enough times that I think we'll be good. So what we're going to be talking about today is something that's really important. We've all been dealing with this pandemic. It's been an issue that globally we've had to kind of change the way not only personally we live, but also how our businesses work with employees, with clients, with vendors. It's added a lot of new challenges to the mix of already just operating a business in a normal way. So one of the tools, and the tool that we're going to be talking about, is Microsoft Teams, and it is, I think, a game changer as far as collaborative tools to help you as a business owner, leader, employee, or manager to run the business more effectively. It's not just the video chat system, it's more than that. So during this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the history and leading up to adoption to this point real quick. We'll talk about some use cases and give you some information about how VirtuWorks is using it and how some of the clients that VirtuWorks works with is using Teams. So joining me today is our CEO, Omar Armenteros, of VirtuWorks, and next to him is our VP Director of Sales, Mr. Michael Bumberg, and they will be contributing during this presentation. That's not going to be all me speaking. So before we can really get into Microsoft Teams, we got to give a little bit of history, right? We got to talk a little bit about how we got here. And so I'm going to put up on my screen a slide that should start helping us kind of see what's something about historic moves, is how I like to say it. So let me put this up, and you guys should be seeing it in a second. Yep, there you go. So, back in the late 90s, everybody questioned, why do we need a website? Why do I need to use email? During that time, I can remember email being something that you had to pay for. It's not something that was free, like Gmail and all these other services that are out there. It's something you had to pay to utilize, right? And that's when I got started my career building websites. And I remember telling people, you need a website. And people would say, I don't need a website. People call me, people come to my office. I do all these other things, all these other means to get people to interact with me. But as time went on, as the first .com boom came and went, and then we had some other times that came and went, people literally needed to have a website or they could not do business. You would ask someone and says, what's your website? That was your business card now, or that became the business card. And so that all changed, especially email as well. I remember a time when I would say, I'll send you an email, and people didn't have an email. And now everybody has an email and everybody uses it. The next section the next thing that happened during this evolution is e-commerce. Also, again, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, people were scared of shopping online. They did not want to use a credit card online. They had all these horror stories of people being hacked or, fraud, or all these different problems that one would have. And slowly but surely, technology caught up, security measures caught up, and all these things kind of made everything easier. And I don't think today there's not one person in the United States, probably, and most of the world, has not shopped online. I think everybody has shopped on Amazon or bought something online or ordered food or whatever. So that in e-commerce has become something that everybody is comfortable with, and just does on a daily basis, right? After that, there's another evolution, and I like to use this example, which is VoIP, or voice over IP, or internet telephony. When that started, it was basically, we could not have voice over IP without having bandwidth that could support that media going over the internet. Voice calls and video calls could not handle until we had DSL, until we had T1s, until we had gigabit speeds, and everybody now, even at home, has gigabit speed. So this enabled this technology to take hold. And then on a business side, back in the day, you had a huge, equipment that you had to use PBX, basically, to route calls between employees. That's gone away. That's now software. That's now in the cloud. And you don't have to pay a technician to go add a new feature. It's just a flip of a switch or change your subscription, and you got all the features that an enterprise company had back in the day. And that leads us to the next stage, which is working remotely. Working remotely was something that a lot of people did, but and I've been doing it for 3 or 4 years, but not a lot of people have implemented, because a lot of people still think that they need to have their employees in the house, and many people do have to have that, but they didn't have any options, or didn't think they had options to do this remotely. So with that being said, most people don't know this, or some people that may know me in this presentation don't know that I worked with VirtuWorks 20 years ago. So I started in the late 90s with VirtuWorks. Later on, I stopped working for them, but now I'm working with them again. And I remember while I was learning how to build websites in those days, I went to Omar's office, and basically I'm going to take off this the screen here so that I can see you guys. But basically, I went to Omar's office, and he told me that basically the internet would be everywhere, and that your Word document, your Excel sheet, your applications would be in the cloud. And I didn't believe him at the time, or I kind of foresaw, but I thought that was like very, very far in the future. So Omar, why don't you tell us about the early days of VirtuWorks, that time that I started there, and how we're here today?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. A little bit about VirtuWorks. VirtuWorks was started in 1994. We were one of the first ISPs in Miami. We used to be called JustNet at the time. We provided dial-up internet services and website services and stuff to maybe 1,000 businesses. Doing dial-up services 28.8, real slow stuff. We're talking about back in the day when Netscape invented the browser, right? It's that far back. We started off back then, doing internet services and also doing break-fix IT services. Basically, people would call us up with their problems, and we would go out and fix it for an hourly fee. This was the early stages of VirtuWorks. Throughout the years, and a byproduct of the financial crisis in 2007, 2008, we had a lot of customers that really were shying away from that hourly model, and they were really insisting on flat fees and the ability for us to give them a budgetable monthly fee that they would be able to pay every month. And through that process, managed services became a thing here. We converted, I would say, almost 90% of our clients from hourly break-fix accounts over to managed services. After that transition, or what we would like to call transformations, we had another transformation to becoming, basically a cloud services provider. Through the process of managing services for our clients, we discovered that the need for our clients for virtual servers, for hardware servers, for routers, and different services in the cloud were really the driving force behind why people were using us, not necessarily our managed services directly, right? The managed services was a byproduct of the services that we were creating for the client. So that second transformation really was us taking a hold of the fact that cloud services was really the core competency that we had, and basically moving all our support services in support of those cloud services that now we procure, in ways like, for instance, with our VoIP, voice over IP, or with our homegrown cloud services like Cloud Folders, or we also have third-party cloud services from Microsoft and WebRoot Security, and list goes on and on. Gianni?
Yep. So, that's kind of talking about in the past, right? And how we evolved, right? And how VirtuWorks evolved from being one of the pioneers of Miami's internet service providers to becoming a managed service provider, becoming a cloud provider, and kind of implementing all these technologies. It's kind of like, I use the word Sherpa, like a guru, kind of guiding businesses on how to use this technology for the best. So the next slide I'm going to put up on the screen is about adoption, right? And there's many stages of adoption for technology, but there's three particular stages that I'll break down today. I'll briefly show this and then I'll come back to the screen with me. But basically, I like to talk about early adopters. I'm an early adopter. I love to play with all new technology. Give me any product and I like to take it apart. I like to use it. I like to experiment with it. I'm willing for the product to break and have bugs. And some people do. Some people do that because they want to have an edge over other people. They want to have the ability to maybe have a process that reduces cost, reduces expenses, reduces workflow, replaces an employee, just gives you an edge over your competition. So some early adopters, I think, have that mentality. But then there's other companies that really need to have something that's tried and true, right? They need to be able to have software that works or technology that works. Software and technology are synonymous. Technology could be a piece of hardware equipment, or it could be a piece of software, and that has to work all the time. They cannot afford for it to go down. They cannot afford for it not to function properly. And then we have the later adopters, right? The people who are just reluctant to make a change. They're still using fax. Fax is one of these technologies that I love to bring up, because even today there's still people using fax, right? But what happens is that when this person is using a technology, this company is using a technology, they get to a point where they can't use it anymore because their clients that they're working with, or the vendors they're working with, or the outside world just doesn't accept it anymore. That person that had to buy something to a vendor with a fax, and that vendor says, you know what, you got to send me an email, or you got to go to this application, you got to do something. Now that fax is obsolete, and they have to jump. They have to make that transition, right? They have to get to that next level to be able to using that. So in today's day, during this pandemic, many of us and many businesses had to jump a chasm, right? The technology was working. They just were reluctant to make it to work for them because they didn't believe it was ready, right? But it's been ready for a while. That progression of more adoption takes time. But now we've been forced to use it, right? Because there's no choice. Our employees and we have to stay at home, and everybody else has to work. Everybody has to work remotely. So you have to use these tools, and Microsoft Teams is one of those things. So there's a lot of difficulty in adopting new technology, right? There's difficulty with the learning curve. There's difficulty with cost. There's difficulty with just implementing it and understanding how to use it. So I think Omar and VirtuWorks as a whole has had a fantastic way of kind of driving clients to find the right technology that fits. So Omar, why don't you tell us about how adoption works, how VirtuWorks makes it easy, and whatnot?
Yeah, sure. Well, adoption is a good subject to cover, especially when we're talking about something like Teams. What normally happens with adoption is that when us as an IT company or support organization want to try to implement something new, for instance, like Teams into an organization, existing organization, the first people that we need to go out and seek, basically buy-in from it. And when I say buy-in, I mean people wanting to get this done is from executives and managers. If we don't get proper buy-in from those people, 90% of the time these projects are going to fail, because it's kind of like anything else, right? If the boss isn't saying, hey, you need to do this, nobody really pays attention or really really engages in that until there's a certain amount of buy-in and the executives and managers trying to drive the culture in that direction. VirtuWorks as a company is a Microsoft Gold partner and a Tier 1 CSP, which means we have direct relationships with Microsoft and a direct support lead. So as a support partner for any type of implementation or adoption in any form, VirtuWorks is a great partner to have. We could bring resources from Microsoft. We could bring resources from VirtuWorks. We have a lot of competency in prior deployments, and actually going through these adoption phases with other customers. We're a great person to ask for help. Another thing that we're able to provide customers is training, be it one-on-one training, group training, online training, like this one that we're doing here. We could kind of scope them out right. We could scope them out directly to customers' needs and make private events if we had to. But training is something that the customers also sometimes don't have enough time for, or can't get everybody in the room together to engage, and something that, it makes adoption a little bit harder when the customer doesn't understand the need for it. Go back through the list. The most important thing is buy-in from executives, buy-ins from managers, training everybody at the right place, making sure everybody knows how to use the tools that you're providing them, and of course, at the end of the day, for the accounting department, they want to know that this is not going to raise their cost, right? It's not, the CFO is in the background saying, well, hey, how much is this going to cost me, right? Well, let's talk
per person. What?
Right. So let's talk about that for a minute. In the case of Microsoft Teams, something that a lot of people don't really realize is that most of you are already subscribed to Microsoft products, and Teams is already included. If you don't have Teams in the products that you have engaged with Microsoft, Microsoft does provide a 1-year exploratory license that could be applied to your account to every employee, which they would get full rights of use to every feature that Teams has to offer. So the answer is pretty simply, in most cases, adopting Microsoft Teams as a collaborative tool isn't going to cost you much at all, because you already have what you need in most cases.
Got it. So, I mean, that aspect of everybody getting it, right? It helps with adoption. It's not one person using it, it's everybody.
Correct.
So I think that's very helpful.
Right, and sometimes customers miss the fact that, hey, for instance, like let's compare to Zoom, right? Somebody thinks, okay, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to sign up a one Zoom account for my entire company, right? Well, that's not very collaborative, right? You only have one account. Not everybody could access it. Only one person can use it at one time. For tools like this to really, get out there, you have to give it to everybody, and you have to let them explore.
Yep, got it. So, with that being said, we talked a little bit about then. And talking about now, I'm going to put up another slide, and in a second, I'm going to pass off to Michael. But we talked about how basically collaboration changed. I talked about e-commerce and I talked about websites. Those are tools and kind of forward-facing stuff. But email and voice over IP, those are collaboration tools that before, technologically speaking, were one way, and now it's a different way. So, Michael, I know that you've seen a progression, right, of how businesses, while you've been working at VirtuWorks and in your past lives as well, how people worked and how they're working now. And I brought up this slide. It's kind of an illustration, literally, of what we're dealing with right now. Maybe you can touch on some of these the subject.
Sure, Gianni. Thank you. So, where I want to start, let's talk about really what the meeting's about. Doing business in quarantine. That's where we are today. Let's talk about going back just a couple months and how people did business. And we'll look at some of the small businesses where people would actually come into the office. You were able to meet with your peers, your managers, the leadership team, vendors, clients in an office environment. Today, that really is not possible, right? We're in an environment where everyone is now spread out. So Microsoft Teams really gives us the ability to function in a very similar way that we did when we were in the office, but now while we're all apart. First of all, one big benefit is you can do this from anywhere. We don't have to get on planes. We don't have to go travel to see customers. We can see the customers on the Teams meeting just like they're sitting in front of us. So these are huge benefits, and being able to keep the companies communicating with each other, whether it's technicians in the field, engineers, here at VirtuWorks, we don't lose a beat. It's constant communication. It keeps us on top of everything.
There is up to instant communication, no matter where anybody's.
Correct. It's instant communication, and you know, a lot of companies, you know, especially a lot of small companies, they're not used to really meeting together, right? They're used to, you know, having people do 10 different things, and everybody's out doing their own thing, and it's very hard. So they might not have the meetings that are normally, you know, they would normally have. With Teams in this environment, now everybody can be together and communicate, like Omar said, instantaneously. It's a huge, huge win. It also allows for these companies to grow. They can keep, you know, they can keep moving forward, keep that collaboration, whether it be with customers, employees, and moving forward to grow in the environment we're in today. A little bit later in the presentation, I'm going to go into a couple of case scenarios that we've experienced as this transition from working in the office to remote. So until then, I'll throw it back to Gianni.
Awesome. That's a good explanation, kind of like talking about how things were happening before, right? That illustration that I put up there, you could see people in cubicles, and you could see people collaborating around a desk like you guys are right now. And it's actually funny, I just realized the picture is actually the same picture is happening right now. Two people with a screen back there. We just need to put three clocks back there, and it'll be exactly the same illustration.
It really is true. That's where we are today.
Exactly. So I'm going to bring up a quick slide and just kind of like bring around or talk back to what Michael was saying. You know, it's basically ineffective communication, right? The way we were doing it. And now communication is much more collaborative, right? We have more agility. That's the word. It's really about the speed of instant communication. You don't have to worry about a long duration of executing time. You know, I look at like Mad Men, and they got like teams of people typing, writing letters to send to their people, and wait for that to go to them. You know, we're not in that world. I didn't experience that world, but it still keeps on getting faster, right? Quality of work gets better because people they don't have the right data, and by having that data readily available with these tools, with this calibration infrastructure like Teams, can make you make better decisions. You don't have to be thinking or wondering where something is, right? It's all there. And then the biggest point is what Michael was talking about with growth, right? You can't grow a company if you're not communicating. You can't grow a company if the leaders can't see what every department's doing. So that leads to innovation, it leads to discovery, it leads to new invention, right? And so with that being said, what I talked about with this collaboration environment, these tools that allow us to be agile, that let us have better quality work, that kind of is all within the Office 365 environment. Omar touched on the fact that Office 365 provides you Teams, but the fact that Teams is integrated with not just a chat and video functionality, there's more to it. And Omar, why don't you tell us just briefly, I think everybody kind of knows Office 365, but touch on the points. I'll put up a slide while you're talking for a second that can guide the conversation, but let's talk about 365 with Teams.
Sure, no problem, man. So Teams is just a small portion of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, and it's a fairly new one. It's something that Microsoft has built in order to basically tie together all the different collaborative tools that all the different tools that they have into one collaborative experience. Teams lets you basically bring together the best of Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and group messaging into one interface. Office 365 as a whole, though, it basically, it's a full ecosystem of information to store your data, right? If you were to use your email, for instance, in Exchange, and you have a bunch of email data, your contacts, your calendar, that data becomes available inside of Teams. It becomes available inside of SharePoint. It becomes available in other Microsoft ecosystem products like Microsoft Bookings, which is the ability to allow people to schedule appointments from the internet off your calendar. Or for instance, in Teams, there's a product called Microsoft Staff Hub, which basically adds the ability for frontline workers schedules to be published into the team interface allows frontline workers to look at their schedule, check in and out of their work schedule, and actually mark off what they did throughout the day. So then Teams actually becomes like a time clock, and it lets you manage your people. Another feature of Teams and Exchange and the rest of the ecosystem is Azure Active Directory, right? If you were to go inside of Azure Active Directory and tag all your employees with their manager, then inside of Microsoft Teams, you'd be able to see an organizational chart and find out who works for who and who works under who, and actually see the hierarchy of employees all the way up to the top of the chain of command, and understand who you would need to talk to in a larger organization to get something done. And those are just some small examples of what's possible. Another example is, in Microsoft Teams, is the ability to make it a phone system. Teams has a PBX feature that you could enable, and it'll actually allow you to have external callers and get phone calls at your Teams client, and you could dial out.
You can actually have like a phone number that people can call in. It's going to go into that Teams app.
Yes, and just like other conference systems, for instance, like GoToMeeting or Zoom or anything else, you could add an audio conferencing capability to your Teams account, which allows for an external direct number to be dialed to join a meeting when somebody needs to join. So the only way is not just opening up Teams and joining a meeting. You could call from your cell phone and join a meeting, or somebody that doesn't have Teams at all could join the meeting, and just dial a number and a PIN code, which is what everybody's used to.
Got it.
Another good feature of Teams that kind of interacts with the rest of the Microsoft Cloud is presence, right? If you have Teams running and you're inside of Outlook, for instance, next to the person's contact names, you're going to see a little green dot or a red dot, depending on if the person's available or not. If they're at their desk and they're doing, they're available to talk, their dot will be green. If they've been away from their desk for a certain amount of time, it'll be yellow. And if they're in a meeting or something on their calendar, blocks the time that it blocks the current time, it'll show red, like they're out of the office or whatever. These are all features that kind of bleed through the rest of the Microsoft ecosystem, and basically make it more than just a collaborative tool. It's more of a full data experience between all these different apps, and the ability for all that data to kind of communicate between all the different options.
Yeah,
that's
awesome. I think another great feature, just to add on to Omar, is that whether you're in a chat or whether you're in a Teams meeting, right, the history is there. So we can constantly go back and use that as reference as as we need, right? Mm-hmm. If I have a chat going on with a project, boom, I can go back and see everything that's going on with that project, and it stays there. And even the documents.
Well, it's one of the ways that we were talking about. I think that we're going to touch further on later on is how to create groups and make targeted groups. Yep. All right, so Gianni, you keep going.
Awesome. All right. Well, I have just to recap everything that Omar kind of talked about with 365, and how it kind of combines with Teams. I'm going to put up a quick slide, talk through it, and then come back to me. But basically, just kind of recap all that stuff. Chat is for today's Teams. Everybody uses WhatsApp, text messaging, Facebook Messenger. They're on Instagram. If you talked about this a couple of years ago, business people were probably not doing much of this, right? But everybody knows how to use it. So that learning curve is gone. People know how to use it. Chat becomes a form of communication. And Omar and I kind of banter on this a couple of times. Omar will send me or we'll talk about something late in the evening, and I'll get off because I'm gonna have dinner. I don't have to really jump on back to his thing because he knows if I saw it or not. And I know that I can respond, right? So it's a constant.
Like most people think that chat means immediacy and that you have to respond right away, but it's all about culture, right? And my culture of chat is send people messages, let them answer when they have a chance, and even if it's not a completely fluent, immediate conversation, it's still more immediate than email. Because I could actually see when the person read it, and if they didn't answer me, then I know I got to give them a call and beat them up.
Yep. So there's the aspect of team becoming the hub of the network or the teamwork, right? Network and teamwork. and Microsoft products bring that together, right? The Teams environment becomes almost like the water jug. What's it? You have the water. What's it called when you have the water? When you're talking gossip by the water fountain thing.
Water cooler.
Yeah,
Water. That's
there you go.
I was having a blank in my brain. The water cooler. Teams becomes the water cooler, right? That becomes a place where people are interacting, sharing ideas. Sometimes good ideas come from just a conversation, right? So it becomes that main hub of all these pieces coming together. Word docs, PowerPoint presentations. This very presentation, if people may not realize this, was collaborated on remotely and internally through Teams. So we had meetings, we had calls, we had shared documents, we shared notes, everything all through Teams. And me being also a remote person, not being part of VirtuWorks directly. The other thing that Omar brought up is the aspect of customizability, right? There's all these different things and tools, some that are very technical. He brought up Active Directory, he brought up Azure. Many of you people that are on this call may not know exactly what those things mean, but those are tools that allow it to be customized to how you work, right? You don't need to know those pieces, right? You don't need to know how the engine works to drive a car. You have someone that's going to help you build that, right? And then finally, there's an aspect of security. And so we're going to go down this path where we're going to start comparing what's out there and security. And that's the part that we really have to focus some time and effort into thinking about, because Microsoft is an enterprise system that's available not only to the Fortune 100 or 10, it's available to even the smallest business, right? So I'm going to go to the next slide, and I'm going to talk about Zoom and other video chat apps, right? I'm just going to briefly have this as a backdrop to my conversation. I've been working remotely for more than 4 years. I worked remotely for a company out of Toronto for a year, where I was on a video call every day and in almost a telepresence kind of way. I've worked with my clients all over the world with a video system, and I had to use what was available. Sometimes I use Skype, sometimes I use Google Meet, sometimes I use Zoom. But until I started working with VirtuWorks again and started using Teams, I didn't really realize what the capability of what Teams has to offer. Zoom had one very good thing, and that's what made them popular, is you would send a link and people could join the meeting very quickly. But with that comes with a lot of baggage that I don't think many people realize what's involved with that clicking of a link, right? Microsoft has implemented that now with Teams, and it's very easy to invite someone to a meeting and have a quick call, right? And have 3 or 4 people in a meeting and do all the same things that all these other things happen. But the big thing that we got to address is security, right? There's been a lot of reports recently, Zoom bombing. I don't know if you guys have heard that, but Zoom bombing is when someone jumps into a meeting because it was very convenient. And I don't know how these hackers did it, but basically they jump in and take over a meeting or do something bad. I actually was on Facebook, saw a commissioner of Miami use Zoom to transmit live through Facebook and got Zoom bombed during her presentation, where all these profane things were put up on screen. And how's she gonna live that down? That was kind of like pretty a difficult thing. So because Omar is a security guru in this realm, has been doing it for so long, and the fact that VirtuWorks, by the way, is ISO certified in security, he can talk to this point. And I think it's very important that everybody in this call hear what the biggest differences are. The biggest difference, I would say, between Zoom and all the Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all the others, right? Omar, why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So the biggest difference that I would kind of say, that exists between most of these other platforms and the Microsoft Cloud is that Teams is built upon the foundation of a Microsoft Azure Active Directory, which is Microsoft's secure identity platform. Microsoft has spent billions of dollars on this identity platform and adding security features like multi-form factor authentication, machine learning, risk analysis of remote connections to services, auditing capabilities, and basically Microsoft has to play by a different rule book because they already work for tons of Fortune 500 companies and people that are forced to adhere to things like the ADA, for disabled people, for instance. We'll give you an example how Microsoft Teams has the ability to close caption a live event versus not live caption a live event, which makes it compliant for handicap for people who can't hear. Outside of that, though, from a security point of view, like I was starting to say, everything inside of the Microsoft Cloud is basically tied back to this Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory secures everything. It secures your OneDrive files. It secures your SharePoint files. It secures your Microsoft Team meetings. It secures, practically anything that you're going to do in the Microsoft Cloud.
Omar, but basically Active Directory is kind of like a login, right? Like the way that people log into things and the permissions they get.
It is a login system, and it is the root of all Microsoft Cloud products. Everything is basically derived from Microsoft Active Directory.
Got it.
Another thing, though, when we come into this, though, about security, for instance, say inside of Zoom, you were to share a document, right? And that document was an Excel spreadsheet. It was an accounting spreadsheet, and that accounting spreadsheet had a bunch of numbers on it for your financial, your income and expenses statements for the year, right? Or one of your clients, right? You had uploaded this document into the Microsoft Cloud, and you had shared it with 4 or 5 people out of your organization, but you have 100 people in your organization. Now, let's say that your counterpart goes out and doesn't realize that this is a secure document and wants to share it with the rest of the team on Teams. They would grab that document and drag it into Teams. And when they do, what ends up happening is that the document itself is still secured by Microsoft Active Directory, regardless of the fact that that person shared it. 95 out of those 100 people wouldn't be able to access that document. Only the 4 people that the document was originally shared with. So that's one aspect of how security, across all aspects is kind of addressed when you're working with Teams. Outside of that, Teams also supports reporting, and reporting. When we say reporting, it's just not a participant list. For instance, like who was inside of the last meeting. When we say reporting, chat history, communication history, call time lengths. What did somebody say to somebody else inside of a chat? Was it offensive? Basically more, kind of securing the company's communication, so that way the company owns all the communications. And then going back a little bit further, right? Since all these accounts belong to the company and not the end user, let me go back a second. In Zoom, for instance, if you were to have a meeting with 100 people, and those 100 people most probably don't all have corporate accounts. A lot of these people went out to Zoom and created a personal Zoom account, and basically they're signing in with their own account. They accepted their own end user license agreement. It wasn't a company provided login, right? What does this mean to the company? It means that if the company fires that employee, all the things that were created inside of that Zoom client belongs to that employee. So for instance, if that employee recorded a meeting while they were using their own Zoom account of a confidential corporate gathering, they would be able to download that meeting and upload it to YouTube, and you wouldn't be able to say anything at all because they created that content with their own tool. And it was under copyright. It's under their copyright. They could do anything they want with it. You can't make them destroy it. In the case of Microsoft Teams, Microsoft has basically built in all the recording control features and auditing features to be owned by the corporate entity, the organization. So in any situation like that, you wouldn't have a concern where the customer, where the company or the organization lost a video that wasn't supposed to be shared, for instance. And that's a really important note, because when people start suing each other over things that happen that were in Zoom meetings, it's, people are going to start realizing, wow, this wasn't such a great idea. Now they have all this video proof.
Yeah, it's bound to happen. Some
bound to happen.
Come out.
This goes back to adoption, right? We were talking about earlier, right? In the case of Zoom, Zoom had a really quick bring up because of this pandemic. You know, before the pandemic, they had something like 20 million daily users. And after the pandemic, they have something like 200 million daily users. So what that tells to me is that a lot of people skipped the adoption phase where they were asking tough questions about security, about what happens to these videos.
That would work today.
Right. They just jumped on it. They needed to get together. They had to make a video. They had to have a video conference. It's what's cool. It's what everybody's doing. So, you know, they didn't ask any questions. Everybody else is doing it. Let's jump on Zoom, right?
Got it.
But it's not a great idea for the company because the company is now creating unnecessary exposure.
Got it. So with that being said, I think you touched on a lot of features. We touched on a lot of kind of ways that Teams makes things better, right? So I'll put up a quick screen here, and in a second I'll be passing it off to Michael to talk about some use cases. I think a lot of people probably have been waiting to kind of hear how they can use it for their business, right? How they can implement this in a way that's going to be meaningful to them. Security is a big thing, and I'm glad that we touched on it first, because I don't think a lot of people I think people are reactive, right? When something happens, they don't, you know, it's something kind of like you're not looking at it. You don't see that it's a threat. Everybody else is doing it. It's not a big deal. So I think I'm glad that Omar brought up all these points. But you know, the ways that Teams is used today, and most of these systems are used today. Number one, project management. You know, you can hold conversation transparency. The fact that I can have a department, let's say I'm in marketing, right, and have my employees, my subordinates, and my boss, let's say, have a marketing area for me to chat, right? If I'm chatting with everybody, my boss, my manager, or someone else can see that whole conversation. There's transparency there, right? How long did it take that person to respond? How long I asked for something and they didn't provide it to the next day, or it wasn't, you know, that great. Everybody can see that. So there's an accountability and transparency that happens there. Omar touched on it. I love to talk about this. Let's get rid of these one-line emails, right? Like, we're gonna have a meeting. You send an email saying, "Are you gonna be there?" And the other person, "No, I gotta reschedule." And then it's like this back and forth on an email. The thread of this email is like massive. It's taking up your inbox. And I was talking to someone this morning. You know, I'm not OCD, but I'm OCD with my inbox. I like that thing to be. I try to get it to zero as much as possible, or delegate. So having chat, that helps out a lot, right? You can say, "Hey, can you send this? Can you are you going to be available in a couple minutes?" You know, immediate information. Personal productivity. Michael brought this up, the fact that he can see everything all at once, right? He had conversations. He knows that a link was shared with him. He doesn't have to ask that person again. He knows it's there, so he could do a quick search, find that resource, find that information. It makes him more agile. It gives him more quality output, right? Because it's all in front of them. And then finally, there's calls and meetings. You know, you can connect with people any which way. Video. Let me pass back to my face. Video, phone calls, as Omar mentioned, which is PBX and voice, which not many of these systems do, by the way, and not many may provide a VoIP number, but don't have the means to have like call routing and auto attendance and voicemail. Teams can do that, right? And then the last little bit on how people use it is, if Michael's doing something, just like I'm doing here, and he asked, "Gianni, can you share your screen so I can see what you're doing?" I can share my screen. Maybe I'm having difficulty. He can actually request control of my screen within limitation to do stuff to help me kind of move forward, right? So I'm gonna put up a slide for a second as I pass to Michael, and we're gonna talk about some use cases. He's gonna talk about how VirtuWorks is using it, and he's gonna talk about how other people that are within the VirtuWorks family of clients, right, how they're using it. So Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the use cases?
Thanks, Gianni. So yeah, I'll just make this kind of quick in how we use Teams here on a daily basis. We've implemented every single morning associates to check in. We're able to see whether they're ready to do the work, whether it's a technician, whether it's an engineer, or sales, purchasing. We set up individual meetings, maybe 20 or 30 minutes for each different meeting, incorporating the different divisions of our company. And what that really does is it allows us to get our day started, be able to deal with any type of issues that we might have seen from the day before, plan the current day and even the next day to make sure that we're on top of everything that we need to be for our customers. Omar and I were actually talking about this recently, that this entire environment that we're in now has even brought us even closer and in more communication, you know, in a big way, which then also when we finally do come back from the quarantine, we can keep going and moving forward with it, because it definitely helps us grow and it helps us stay in touch.
We will never have another office meeting again that's not through Teams. It just won't happen. I mean, those days that we would wake up at 7:30 in the morning on a Wednesday and drive to the office and buy everybody croquetas and, you know.
Well, what's really cool
is that we're done with that. Everybody's gonna have to buy their own breakfast in their house.
But what's really cool is we do have these meetings with the entire staff, and it's seamless. You know, it's all video. You can see each other, so it really makes it very, very efficient. And especially being far apart, right? Not everybody is here. Just to go into a couple of client scenarios. We've had numerous companies, you know, over the years that have actually had Teams. They've had it, but they never really used it. They always thought that, oh, you know what, I need everyone here. I need to see everyone. And they really didn't use it. In this environment, it's become really a necessity. And even companies like law firms that might not have used it before and thought the lawyers all had to be there, they're using it. They're checking in with them. They're able to have their meetings. They're able to schedule meetings with their customers. It's a very, very efficient way of managing the group without having them right there and staying in touch. You know, just a couple of quick other stories. We've had scenarios where companies, you know, didn't really want the associates to use Teams, right? They thought maybe it might be a distraction, a little, you know, turn it off for everyone, right? And now we go into this environment and it's like, whoop, we need everybody to have it, and they love it, right? They love it, and they're in constant communication, and it keeps them moving forward and with the ability to grow. You know, I mean, that's really the benefit. It's a win-win across the board using Teams and keeping companies in touch and relevant.
Got it.
Gianni, I'll just throw it over back to you.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to say some things on that. You know, the slide I had up, you know, using it for customer support, human resources. Omar mentioned training. Not only training, we do, VirtuWorks does training to our customers, but training within employees, right? Teaching them how to do something. You can use a video and train someone using Teams, record that video and then reshare it. If they want to refer back to that video, they have that. You don't have to redo it again. It's there. You know, sales, marketing, and finance. But, you know, Michael touched on something I want to talk about real quick. You know, sometimes, and this has to go back to adoption. Sometimes you adopt something, you don't really know how to use it, right? You don't know how to use it effectively. And so that company that wasn't found that a distraction was they didn't have a protocol, right? If you had an office where everybody just decided that I'm going to scream, I'm going to bring an instrument, I'm going to bring a dog, just random things, right? That office would not function, right? And so if you're a business owner, you say, you know what, you start the day today. When you come in the morning, we expect you to wear your uniform. We expect you to say hello to your customers. You know, the same thing you can do with chat.
What you're talking about is buy-in from executives and managers, right? Without it, nothing happens.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have to basically kind of set the culture, right? Yes. So with culture, you know, and we talked about a lot of these different ways to use it. I brought a couple up, you know, engineering teams, for example. I know Michael had a story about how engineering. Why don't you tell us about like VirtuWorks and engineering, how that works? Because there's probably people that do this, right? How they collaborate.
Well, I mean, in reference to engineering, anytime that we set up a project, if we bring on a new customer or current customers and it's a project, we make sure we include every team member that's going to be involved in that project. The engineer, the technician.
Create targeted chat groups.
Exactly. So, you know,
that have to do either with the department or with a project or with a topic. For instance, we might have we might have chat groups that are specifically to a specific customer project. Or for instance, there's a group of 3 or 4 guys that are always working on our core servers. We have an ongoing, never-ending chat between us 4. We have a
You
chat
can
with
include the client
yeah,
too, right?
we have
questions with the client.
eight. Yeah, exactly. We have 8 people in a chat for our dispatch department. Sales department is the same thing. We have another ongoing chat. So inside of my personal team's chat, I probably have 40 or 50 ongoing chat groups. That range. Everybody's different membership in every single one, just depending on who's involved in that issue. And that really helps us out a lot because. Like we said earlier, in this whole conversation, is that the chat history is there, and if I got to go back and see, hey, well, what did I tell this guy to do, 3 or 4 days ago on this thing? I could scroll back up, I could find what I said, I could remind them, I could reply on it and say, hey, what about this? Why haven't you answered me on this? It's really helpful, and it creates a streamlined conversation on anything, and it helps everybody remember what's going on.
Yeah, and just to jump on top of that, I mean, Omar, you work with developers all over the world, different time zones. It doesn't matter. So it just allows any type of business to fluently work with all ends of their business seamlessly.
All right, so Gianni, I think we're getting down to the last bit here of time that we got.
Yeah, a little bit, 15 minutes. So what I was going to do now is just going to put up a couple screens of the product to kind of showcase some of the features. I'll give some tips and things things most people, if they're using Teams now, may not be aware of. So real quick, I'm going to go specifically in the Teams section with another screenshot. We mentioned you can collaborate internally, externally. There's calendar integration. There's voice and video calls. Actually, before I continue, there's fun backgrounds. Real quick, you could change your background just like you do in Zoom. I'll change my background. Let's do something fun. I'm in space here, right? Let's play some Minecraft. My kids love Minecraft, or basically in the nebula, right? So I'll leave it in the nebula for now. But basically, I'm going to go back to my screens and then I'm going to go to the actual slides, right? Basically, this is a typical view you get. Everybody's familiar with this type of view now, especially since Zoom and every other thing. You have this Brady Bunch kind of view.
Right. One thing to mention here is that this view of 4x4, 4 people, is something that we get a lot of feedback on from people about Teams. Microsoft has announced that within the next week and a half, 2 weeks, they will be creating this video gallery to actually be 3x3, which means that there'll be up to 9 people at once showing up in the video conference, which seems to be a big deal for a lot of people. It's not going to be as many as the competitors at this point, but it's something that they're working on, and it will improve over time.
Got it. And with that being said, Microsoft is really putting a lot of time and effort in adding features. That background feature wasn't around, and they literally implemented that within a couple of days or a week, because they're able to do it. They have the resources to do it. So typically in Teams, you have, this is during a conference call or a live presentation like we're doing now. You can do this as well. You can have live webinars. You can see people within the team. You can invite people from the outside, and you have this ribbon here on the left that will have different application icons that for certain, VirtuWorks will set that up for you. Out of the box, it will have certain ones, but more things can be customized here on the left. The next part is this environment works across the board. On mobile, I'm showing here, it looks the same, it works the same, it's very easy to use. It's not just the chat and the video, but sharing documents and all that is there. It works across all different platforms. On the desktop, I'm running Teams through my desktop. I have it on my phone, on my Android. You can have it on your iPad. So, there's really no excuse. And the fact that you have Active Directory and this login functionality, this controls all the data as well that's being put onto this back and forth within these systems. Lastly, and there's a couple more slides here. This is what a typical Teams room or Teams looks like, right? You have normal chats that have direct one-to-one. In the chat section up here, you also have group chats where you can bring in special little kind of breakout meetings. But Teams itself, and Omar, we were talking about this, they're called channels within the Teams. And you can break that apart, right? You can put icons among them. This could be one division of the company. This could be a department. Each department could have their own tabs, right, that tie into certain types of things that either Microsoft provides or that you want to add to the team. It becomes kind of like that hub of the team. Any document that you share is going to have its icon.
And
right?
also other parts of the Microsoft Cloud. For instance, you could embed a Power BI screenshot, or an Excel spreadsheet could be added as a tab, or a Word document, or Microsoft, anything. You know, anything that's available in the Microsoft Cloud could basically be added there.
Correct. And as Omar mentioned, you know, he's dealing with about 40 different chats. That may sound overwhelming, but it actually isn't, right? And just like email, you have an activities area and you have these little red dots that basically show you, or bolded, that show you if something hasn't been read. And once you click it, it'll open it up and show you what's going on. You're going to also notice in these slides in a second, actually this one doesn't have it for us to look at, but if I send a message, there has like a little eyeball that comes up, and I know if everybody in the room has actually seen my thing. They can't later say, no, I didn't see it. No, you saw it because you saw a little eyeball. I know you saw it, right? And so that's an aspect of presence. Here's the activity tab that I was mentioning before. Meetings, you can set meetings within Teams or through Outlook, right? You can actually set a meeting through Outlook. It sends the link and the button for someone to join right through there. It's very seamless, it's very easy. And then the other cool thing that I like to bring up, and then we'll finish, and we're going to go into Q&A in a second. So if you guys have any questions, we're running close to out of time. We have a couple questions that I could see popping in, but if you have a question, please ask it now. There's an aspect of bots, right? And so there's a lot of bots that come with that have already been integrated with Microsoft Teams. And one in particular, I'm going to highlight this one called Hipmunk, which is really cool. Which obviously an administrator has to accept these bots to be added to the account. But in this case, this is a robot or an AI, or, you know, I don't even know what you call it. It's a programmatic kind of conversation where the user says, Hipmunk, I need a cheap non-stop flight to Las Vegas. Hipmunk, the bot, responds with a question, and then the person responds back to what airport they want to go, and the bot responds. Basically goes out the internet, does all the research for you, and brings back all the information. And this is pretty powerful, right? This is not just the only bot. There's bots for all different types of things. I've seen bots that, like, you can't figure out what you're going to have for lunch and what restaurants. There's a bot that will help you figure that out, right? So, and then this last bit is the last one, and then we're going to jump to Q&A. This is what it's all about: security, privacy, making sure your data is secure. This screenshot that you see playing right here is someone through the security and compliance. That's something that VirtuWorks can help with, or if you're large enough that you have a CSO, a security officer, or a CTO, or someone can use this to look up messages, can look up conversations. The fact that some of this information is also being transcribed as it's happening, that information is readily available, right? So this will take care of issues with I said this or didn't say that. Personal accounts, like, this is the way you run a business. You got to remove the liability and allow yourself to run in a way that's controlled, and also that your employees and everybody knows that there's accountability to happen there. So with that being said, I'm going to jump to the Q&A. We have one question that I can see pop up. If you have any other questions, I'm gonna pick that up. And we have a question from Matthew G, and I'm going to direct this to Omar. I think he is the most qualified to answer this. Having received the notification that Office 365 is changing to Microsoft 365, what is the primary difference? Is this a new version, an upgrade with new features and apps, or is it just a product name change?
Well, first of all, it's not actually being changed from one to the other. It's actually two different products that have actually been available for a very long time now. I think Microsoft 365 has been on the SKU list maybe for about 1.5 years or more. Basically, Microsoft 365 is Microsoft's enhanced bundle of products that are really going to wrap around security into your platform, into your subscription. Office 365 itself, say Microsoft Office 365 E3, let's give that example, will come with Word, Excel, the Microsoft apps, most of the cloud services, but it doesn't include things like multi-four factor authentication, or it doesn't include things like threat prevention, or whatever extended things, risk management for logging in users. Usually when you buy Office 365 E3, in order to get these features, you would have to add on an add-on bundle called Enterprise Security and Mobility, which is Microsoft EMS, which adds about $8.74 a user to your subscription. And with Microsoft 365, those extended features are all rolled in to one product. So they got two versions of Microsoft 365. They have the enterprise and they have the business. Microsoft 365 Business, which is in line with Microsoft Essentials and Microsoft Business Premium, is $20 a user. And if you want to use it with EMS, with the enterprise version of Office, Microsoft Office 365 E3, then Microsoft 365 E3 is $35 a user.
Oh, it's still not bad, and you're getting a crazy amount of very important functionality that any business, big or small.
So depending on the customer and the users and how many SKUs they have, sometimes it makes sense to add the SKUs independently. Sometimes it makes sense to just buy the extended newer SKU, right? Because you're going to get somewhat of a discount. It makes sense when you want to do it for all your employees.
Got it. So I don't think we have any other questions that have come in. I have a question that was from before that someone had asked me. I'm just gonna answer it. How do we roll out Teams? And I think it's really simple. You got to get it implemented. You got to get everybody using it, like Omar had mentioned before. You got to get people just to use a part of it, like chat, right? And once they're comfortable with the chatting, then you add channels, then you add the apps and the bots, and then you probably can add meetings and conferences as people start going. That's probably a pretty good way to roll this out. So if there's no other questions, the back office there, the behind the scenes, if they have any other questions, please post it there. If not, I'm gonna basically end the meeting in a sense. And thank you everybody for joining us in our very first session. I hope it was informative and that you got something great off of it. This recording of this meeting will be available. We'll be sending out through email and through our different channels. And I'm going to pass it off to Michael to talk to you about how basically we can, you can start working with Teams.
Thanks, Gianni. And thanks to everyone for joining. So if anyone is interested, whether you're a current customer or looking to get more information on Teams or any other products, there's a number on the screen right now. Please feel free to give us a call. You can ask for me directly and I'll be able to help you. And we can set up a Teams meeting to go over the different options that we can provide for you. But with that, just want to thank everyone for joining and have a great day and be safe.
Thanks, everyone. Everybody have a good day and hope to see you on the team meeting soon. Bye-bye.